Yo, what's up? It's your boy Vegabomber and welcome to Vegabomber Land. Well, you know what time it is. It's time for a movie review. And the movie I'm reviewing tonight, The Birth of a Nation. Yeah, that film. So, a lot of people have been asking me, all right, Vegabomber, what do you think of this film? And basically, what do you think of the whole controversy surrounding this film? So, let me do both. Let me talk a little bit about the controversy, then get to the film, because, well, you can't really talk about this movie without talking a little bit about the controversy. As it relates to Nate Parker's alleged rape, I'll say it this way. This was 1999. Out of all the evidence that was presented, 11 jurors were white, one was black, and out of all of that, or there were a couple that were non-white, if you will, but 11 of the jurors were white, and the judge definitely was white. And so I have a problem thinking that those folks, if anybody had a reason to want to hate on him, would have done that. I know that the courts aren't sympathetic a lot of times to African American males, especially when it comes to this charge of rape. Emmett Till, anybody? Yeah, so I happen to think myself personally, unless somebody can show me differently, I think that if the people who are paid to make these decisions got it right, then I got to believe it's right until some other new information comes out that tells me that that's all wrong. But at this point, he was found not guilty. I got to go with that. I know O.J. Simpson was also found not guilty, but I just don't want to believe that just because somebody gets acquitted that means that they were still guilty. You know, that just seems a little difficult for me to get my head around. So now, as it relates to the controversy, it wasn't enough that was compelling enough to make me think that he actually really did do it. I think a lot of times people do dumb things, but to say that he went there and then try to say that all the professionals got it wrong and somehow I got it right, I don't know about all that. I think that that case has been tried, so it's not my job to try it in the court of public opinion. All right? So enough of all that. Let's just talk about the film, shall we? Yeah. So Nate Parker, this is his directorial debut, and I would say that he's done a great job in terms of this crafting. The crafting behind this film shows you that he obviously cares and that he's definitely passionate about this particular thing. In fact, he didn't take on any other acting gigs for 2 years to make sure that he could get this thing done and then get it funded. Right, and then of course eventually it did get paid for at the Sundance Film Festival for $17 million, but he owed $10 million on it. He borrowed $10 million, so he'll make a little bit of money, but not as much as you probably think. But then again, he'll also make something off the receipts because he didn't sell it to Fox Searchlight. He sold the distribution rights to Fox Searchlight, and that's a little different than selling the property itself. So he will make some money on this, but clearly he has to pay back those investors first, and they gave him $10 million to make this movie. So we know that Nate Parker as a director was committed to this. Nate Parker as the actor was also committed to this. So what we get is this big passion piece about Nat Turner. So that's right, Nat Turner, a historical figure that probably a lot of people have not heard of. So if you haven't, then this might be good for you to go see this film, at the minimum from the historical perspective. So even if you don't like slavery movies, and I get that, I understand why people are kind of done with those. They're hard to watch, and when you're out on the weekend, you want to go see something fun, and maybe it's not fun to you see this, so I get that. But at the same time, I'll also say those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. So it may be a little good to go out and see this movie and at least see it once. At least once. That's what I'll say about this film up front. So what about Nat Turner? Well, Nat Turner is a slave who was a preacher. He was born into slavery. He never knew what it was like to be free. And the one book that they let him read as a kid was the book called the Bible. And so with the Bible, he gets to that point where he's able to read it, interpret it, and understand it. But the difference is the slave owner was willing to let another slave owner come up and tell him, hey, go let him read that to the other Negroes so that they'll calm down and be more appreciative of what master's given them and let them work, because it says right there in 1 Peter, to obey your master. So cherry pick that, do that. And so Nat Turner then says, all right, I guess I have no choice. I got to go do this. And then he's thinking he's bringing the word, because he does believe, and he is convicted by the word of God and what he's reading in the Bible, right? So there he goes. Now the tension is simply this. When he's out there, at these different plantations reading the good book to these slaves, but only based off of the scriptures that they cherry picked that they wanted him to read, thereby using it as a tool, which that's the thing about the Bible. It can be used as a tool, or it can be used as something that can pull people and bring people together and talk about the unity and the community and all of that good stuff that God created. But in this case, it was, let's use it like a tool against the slaves. It's our propaganda piece. And so that's what they do. They tell them, say this particular verse because we want our slaves to behave and act right. So we won't have to pull out that whip on them, right? So that's what he does. And just here's where the performance first got me. Looking at Nate Parker playing Nat Turner and just looking how he conveyed the uncomfortableness of reading a scripture that he knows they're looking at going, that ain't helping. That ain't helping this situation at all. Can you really sit here and tell me that? Knowing what they just did to me? Show me that in the Bible. I mean, just the look that he gets on his face as he's almost trembling to get started, because the way he reads the Bible isn't that way, and which is pretty interesting. And so he has to do this at several stops. You know, he's on tour. He's on world tour with Muhammad, my man, right? He's doing that Tribe Called Quest thing, if you will, preaching a gospel, but only the parts that they want him to preach. So, yeah, you can see the discontent in Nate Parker's face as he's trying to play and portray Nat Turner. Now, what we know about this film is that Nat Turner obviously leads a rebellion, so that's not a spoiler alert. If you've read it, you know he led a 48-hour rebellion, and so that's what this movie attempts to do. It attempts to capture his life up until that moment where the rebellion happens, and then, well, you know, they deal with him, because he does get caught, or he gives himself up, and they take care of that. They deal with him and his insurrection. So he wanted a revolution, but he only was able to do a revolt, and so with that revolt, that's all it got laid out to be, just a revolt. So in this film, what were some of the great things about this film? I would say that, again, I appreciate Nate Parker with his cinematography, his eye for detail and just setting things up, making things look cool. When you see those cotton fields and when you see some of the imagery that he used, you felt like you were into this period piece, you were right there. So that wasn't a problem at all. It didn't feel fake or stale or like it was a TV production type deal. It kind of pulls you in, and it was there. So I think that was a hit. Another thing that I think that he hit on again was his performance, but also the cast around him. The woman that played the actress that played his wife, I don't know her name right now, but she was good. The actress that played his mom, which was the actress that was in Undercover Brother that I remember as Sister Girl. Yeah, she was in there. She played his mom. She ripped it. And then Armie Hammer, I think he did a good job playing Sam, the white guy that he grew up with, who he was his slave, who eventually was still his slave when they grew up to be men. So he was his personal slave when he was a boy, and he was ended up being his personal slave as they were grown men. And I thought Armie Hammer did a good job there, definitely better than how he did in Lone Ranger, that much is for sure. So I bought that. So I would say that the performances here were pretty good. The imagery I was a little tossed on, right? So the imagery of him watching the little white girl running with the black girl following her, and she's got the little rope around her neck, kind of like a noose, and they're just both running and playing. I thought that was a great piece of imagery to see, to kind of help you see how Nat Turner is processing all that. Now, maybe some of the negatives here would be the idea that I didn't think some of the symbolism that he tried to use kind of fit. It kind of throws you off a little bit. So the symbolism of just the corn and it just starts to bleed, I don't know that I picked up the symbology of all of that. Towards the end, the older Nat Turner with the younger Nat Turner, I don't really feel like that really fit in there. And then I would say probably the other con would be just the pacing of this film, because the pacing is kind of important in a film like this, especially in a world where the films are pretty fast and things move pretty quickly. Anytime you have slower moments in the film, you got to really, the acting has to be right on point, and you got to really care about the characterization, or it falls flat. And I'll say for the most part, it doesn't fall flat, but you are aware that it's slower, and you are aware of what's about to happen because it was already telegraphed. You just want to see the scene and then move on to the next scene. But there's some parts where I felt like it lingered a little bit too long, where we kind of knew what was happening. We knew what was going to happen. So I don't know, maybe it just could have been brought out a little bit more, but I would say that for me the pacing kind of, in places, not in totality, but just in places, it did seem to kind of telegraph it, so therefore it felt like it dragged because you knew what was about to happen next. So, but that's probably the worst this film can do. So what's my overall take on this film? Well, I would say in a world where bad movies exist, this definitely isn't one of them. In a world where super movies exist, great movies exist, I can say that it's not one of those either. Is this a movie that you should go out and see? Absolutely, because I'm going to say that this film is definitely worth your time. Go see this film. Go see it at least once. If you're an historical type person or a history buff, well, I don't need to tell you, because you're going to get it. You're going to go see it. But for those of you who are kind of wondering, and you're willing to go out and see something that's a little different than just superhero movies, always fighting and blue thing in the sky with a MacGuffin and all that stuff, if you need a break from that, this is a great, refreshing break from that, so that you can maybe understand a little bit more about the history and then see how it ties in to maybe some themes that you see that are still going on to this day, but certainly not in that way, not as explicit as that, but maybe a little bit more implicitly. So, at any rate, it's your boy Vegabomber, and that's my take on The Birth of a Nation. You.